afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How Electronic Master Key Systems are Changing the Way Utilities Think About Security. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura Harvey and I am the Managing Editor of Utility Magazine, and we're thrilled to be partnering with DAVCOR to bring you this webinar today. Now, before I go any further, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're all meeting today. For me here in Melbourne, that is the Wurundjeri people. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where all Australian delegates are located today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. So let's get stuck into the ways electronic master keys can really transform security for utilities. Today, I'm being joined by Paul Ackhurst, a facility manager who has worked in the UK, the Netherlands and Australia. David Badke, a security risk and governance specialist for a major Queensland utility, and Jeff Plummer, who is DAVCOR's executive business manager. All of our speakers have a depth of experience in the fields of energy, utilities, and security, and have a wealth of knowledge that they're going to be sharing with us today. Now, before we get our presentation underway, I did want to remind you all that today's session is interactive. So if you do have any questions for our presenters, please submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I'll be keeping an eye on those questions that come in during the day, and I'll direct them to our speakers at the end of the presentation. But now that I've given you that reminder, let's get things underway with our speakers. Now I can see I've got you all on screen, which is great. And I'm also going to bring our presentation up now too, so that you can all see that at home. So I'm pretty sure everyone can see that at home now, which is great. Now that we're all here and we've got our presentation, let's dive in. Now let's just move ahead to the next slide and we'll get stuck straight into things. You can see on this one, I've just provided a bit of a quick overview of today's presentation. So today we'll be kicking things off by introducing our panel members, and then we'll look at what electromechanical systems actually are. Next, we'll look at some of the drivers for companies to invest in those systems. And of course, we'll be covering the benefits of an electromechanical system. So moving ahead to our next slide, let me tell you a little bit more about the other speakers that are joining us today. So David, as I mentioned before, is a security risk management professional with over 17 years of experience managing assets across financial services, retail, and the utilities sectors. Importantly, David has extensive experience in the deployment of electronic master key systems within the utility sector. Now, Paul is a facility manager with global experience. His expertise is in strategic and operational planning and team building, and he's passionate about the built environment and its impact on our lives. And once again, Paul has installed electronic keys in a number of buildings around the world. Now, finally, Jeff Plummer's expertise is in the design and support of electromechanical physical security devices. He's worked across APAC, developing physical and electromechanical locking solutions for banks, retailers, utilities, and all manner of facilities. So moving ahead to our next slide, now that I've given all of our speakers an introduction, here we want to take a closer look at electromechanical systems. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Jeff to tell us a little bit more about them.
All right, can we move to the next slide, please, Laura? All right, so what I'd like to quickly do is just to make sure we're all on one page and explain what a mechanical key system is. By that, I mean a mechanical master key system, what you would see in many facilities around the country. There are many different varieties, but essentially we have a key that fits the whole site, keys that fit certain areas and so forth. And they're fully mechanical, assembled at the locksmith shop and installed in our locks. We then have hardwired access control systems, which are our swipe card and prox card style systems, where the doors are cabled or have battery operated door locks installed, and they form part of an overall hard cabled electronic access control system. Electromechanical master key systems sit in between the two. They take the simplicity of a mechanical master key system in that you leave the locks there, you just replace the cylinders, and combine it with the administration and most of the functionality of a hardwired access control system. So it's a hybrid product we like to talk about, but the beauty is it has some of the common stuff you'd expect in access control, such as the ability to have an audit trail, the ability to delete lost keys or media, and of course the ability to adjust access profiles as the business changes. Next slide, please, Laura. All right, so some of the advantages and disadvantages of the three. Obviously, the top line's always a major stopgap, which is the price. Mechanical master key systems, I say, are very affordable, range $100 to $200. Hardwired access control, obviously the sky's the limit, but $2,500 per door. Electromechanical fits nicely in between at about $600 to $700 a door. The biggest advantages of an electromechanical key system over a mechanical system is the mechanical system. If I lose a high-level key today, my system is virtually broken unless I pull it apart and rekey it. In an electromechanical key system, that media or key could be deleted. The advantage, again, over mechanical is when I put in a mechanical system today, or even an electromechanical key system with a mechanical component, I design it today. If the business need changes, I have to rekey the cylinders. So if it's fully electronic, in electromechanical, you can reassign those access profiles just as you would a card holding person in an access control system. I guess the advantage of an electromechanical key system over a hardwired system is it's fantastic for sites that are dispersed. So telecommunication towers, utilities with remote assets, and also padlocks. If putting a hardwired access control system into a padlock situation generally would mean welding items to a gate, installing conventional locks, getting power and data to that date. With an electromechanical key system, you just pull off the mechanical padlock, put on the electronic. So there's many advantages and disadvantages, and it varies on the specific application. Next slide, please, Laura. All right, quickly, where can they be used? Obviously, these pictures show numerous areas. Electricity, remote access all over, spread over a wide geographic area, very popular there. Water, perhaps most probably our biggest application, because they use lots of padlocks in the water industry, and our padlocks, obviously, if you've got an IP68 padlock and you can give all the benefits of access control, you're in a very good situation for water. Roads, extensively used in roadways, and by roadways I would include speed cameras, as you can see here. So that would be RMS in Sydney. And then roadside cabinets for traffic lights, widely dispersed in Queensland. There's a big installation up there. So we sort of don't think of roads as remote assets, but they really are. Even if that traffic light's in the middle of Sydney, it's still a remote location. Data centres are a big application. And of course, the biggest at the moment is telcos rolling out 5G. So there's lots of opportunities in that space. Next slide, please. Again, applications, as I said, server racks, server farms are very large. Padlocks, and I guess the key to a padlock, if I have 1,000 sites spread out all over Australia or New Zealand, and those sites happen to be require padlocks on the front gates, the last thing I want to do is have a padlock with or a cable there with a battery in it. You've got or a padlock that's not IP68. So a padlock that we can put on that's fully electronic allows you to control it in many ways. Give access upon request when someone meets all the appropriate criteria to get into the site. Other ones that I really like is historic buildings. You sort of think, access control on a historic building would be great, but if it's made out of solid block construction and you're not allowed to chase the walls, so a system that just attaches into the existing lock hardware does keep the historians happy and our security managers happy. But essentially, any door not covered by access control where we run a cable is a candidate for electromechanical key systems. And O'Connell Street in Sydney is a great example. There's a large installation down there at 1 O'Connell Street. Obviously, they have access control on the lifts and the main entries, but all the back of house is under an electromechanical key system. That means that in the past, with a mechanical system, contractors would get a key, go open up, I don't know, the electrical cupboards, leave site with that key, and they were constantly rekeying. With an electromechanical system, the contractor can still get a key and access all those areas, but if they don't return it, the exposure is one key. Of course, the key can be deleted. So the applications are very wide. Laura?
Yeah, next slide. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for that detailed summary of electromechanical keys to date. Really appreciate that. What we're going to do now is move ahead to looking at the FM challenge. As you can see on screen there, and what we mean by the FM challenge is obviously the facilities management challenge. So I think at this point we'll bring Paul and David into the conversation, because obviously these guys have used these types of key systems quite frequently, so they can sort of talk us through things here. We'll move ahead to the next slide now, and we'll talk about look at the first challenge that we want to have a look at. And that, as you can see, is we're looking sort of here at the cost benefit analysis. So you can see up on screen that there are a range of different costs and benefits that are listed. I won't necessarily read through all of them for you. I think at this point in time, we'd really like to hear from Paul and David, just to hear about their experience with managing costs and benefits. David, I might go to you first, if that's all right. What's been your experience in terms of managing costs and benefits that come along with electromechanical key systems?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. One of the big benefits in the business that I'm in is just no cabling, and Jeff's referred to a number of these points, but the no cabling and no power source is one of the big benefits that we saw with in the water utilities network. So we talk about reservoirs out in the water network, where these can be at great heights that you've got to get access to, and we have strict controls in place on who can and can't, who are authorised to get up to those sort of levels. So from a benefit was no cabling, no power. There was none of that required, where it was just a simple change of padlocks in the rollout that we did last year. So that was a big advantage to us with the benefit with that cost. Another advantage that we had and the benefits is reducing our risk. So we have an event of lost or stolen keys, predetermined time in these keys where they just automatically expire. So rather than having to look at potentially replacing, a set of locks out there or masking the mechanical system, it was simple that my risk is reduced at a predetermined time in 3, 4, 2 hours, whatever it may be, where the key will automatically become a dead key. So I might be, $200 to replace a key versus, probably 300,000 plus to potentially replacing a whole keying system out there if it was on the mechanical side of things. So the benefit from a financial perspective, that far outweighed, the benefits, even though there's initial upfront costs, but in the longer term, you're definitely going to see the benefits and the reward down the track. And the IPS 68 resistance to submersion, in the water network, we have padlocks sitting in wet areas in extremes weather. So again, the replacement of locks ongoing, where if you don't have that rating, especially in the water wet network, we see that longer term where we're going to be reducing and less likely to be having to replace locks when they rust out and et cetera, and things along those lines. When you've got this IP68 rating, it was a big advantage. And Bluetooth. So basically the Bluetooth was another advantage that we can set up on our devices to pair with this application. Laura?
Fantastic, thank you. There's obviously a lot of convenience that comes with these systems, clearly. Paul, I might go to you now. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on what traditionally have been the drivers to justify the cost that goes with electromechanical keying systems.
Thanks, Laura. Well, often the investment is upfront, so that's the change you have to make is the upfront cost, and all the benefits come operationally. So you need to look at how can I make an argument for this investment that is going to cost me today a reasonable amount of money, but over the next 20, 25 years will save me a considerable amount of money. And I think you need to have to look a careful look at how your organisation will use electromechanical key operationally. And the benefits include, which have already been touched on, the ease of installation, the fact that you can personalize every single key if you want to. We'll talk more about that later, but rather than being stuck on a suite, each key can be dedicated to a given user. And then, of course, again, has been mentioned, if you are unfortunate enough to lose a key because an electromechanical key is programmed to essentially die after so many hours, that makes your loss of integrity very small and manageable, where if you lose a traditional mechanical key, in theory, you should rekey the whole building or the whole suite. And if you factor that in as a potential cost, then that starts to offset the additional capital investment you make up front. So I would encourage people who are looking at this investment is to really look at the operational benefits they get and work out what that is worth to your organization. And I'm confident you'll find that that will offset the capital cost.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Paul. We might move ahead to the next slide now, and we'll look at the next challenge for facility managers that we wanted to have a look at. You can see here that we're looking at ego and change, two things that can kind of be part of the process to changing over to an electromechanical system. Paul, I'll go to you again first on this one. What are we talking about when we see ego up on screen there?
It's an interesting one, and when I've installed electromechanical keys, it actually took me by surprise, this ego issue, because the traditional bunch of metal keys that you see on the slide there, for many people, it's an ego system. You know, I've got 20 keys attached to my belt, you've only got 10, therefore I'm more important than you. It's probably a masculine thing, and it's something that caught me by surprise when staff started saying, oh, but I want to keep all my metal keys, and you're offering them a single key that will do the whole job. You think that they'd be pleased that their trousers will stay up better, but no, strangely enough, it is an ego thing. So you have to think about how you're going to deal with the people, not just the technology and the change that brings, but how will people cope with losing this important status symbol they've probably had for most of their working lives. And just to leap to the last point there, who pays for lost keys? That was another issue, and particularly brought up by the bean counters where I've done this work, because a new electromechanical key will cost you $250 or so dollars, maybe more than that. And people look at that and go, oh, that's a lot, because getting a new metal key is maybe 10, 15 bucks. But that ignores the fact that if you lose a metal key, you've actually got you should, to keep your integrity in your system, rekey a large number of doors. So the cost is a lot more than just 10, 15 bucks to get a new key, and a lot more than just buying one new cyber key. And who pays? Well, to be honest, we all lose keys, we all lose tools from time to time. That's what happens in the workplace, unfortunately, and we don't normally charge people for those. So you treat the key as the same. If you've got an employee who's always losing things, then you've got a different issue that's not really about who pays for lost things, it's about how do you manage that employee. So don't let these issues become confused or become a distractor to adopting a really smart system.
Thanks, Paul. Some really some good advice there and some key points to be thinking about. Jeff, I'll throw to you now. I believe you've got an example that speaks to this ego question as well.
Yeah, I would like to talk to who pays for lost keys. Obviously, I'm on the sales side of the situation. What I am seeing is people considering these systems is, if you install an electromechanical key system, not all of them, but many of them, the key essentially comes to you unprogrammed. It's just a key. You have to program it and tell it what to do. So what they're doing is they'll roll out a system of padlocks to a whole bunch of sites. If a contractor needs a key, they can just purchase the electronic blank key and then contact the administrator and have that key added. So the person who's paying for the lost key is not so much the employees, they're generally supplied keys, but in many of the situations, it's contractors who need keys, and they're harder to control because you don't see them every day, and they pay for their own key. So they buy a key, they contact whoever administrates the software. So I've now got my key, can I get it enrolled? They literally enroll the key over the phone, they update it using an app on a phone and Bluetooth. They now have a key to the system that works for the a few hours every time they update it. So that's what I'm seeing more in the marketplace.
Great, thanks, Jeff. It's it's an interesting point that you raise, and it's certainly an interesting way of running things behind the scenes. We'll move ahead to our next slide now and look at the next facilities management challenge that we wanted to look at. And I think what we're looking at here is, I guess, sort of the merging between sort of changing and ego. David, I'll bring you into the conversation now. Can you give some insight on customized access and perhaps the Bluetooth capabilities that come with electromechanical key systems?
Yeah, sure, Laura. Basically, in what I did with customized levels is we saw advantages. It's similar to access control, but obviously this application, no requirement for the cabling or power source. So setting up similar levels in what I did with, sort of 3 levels of access, which could be your perimeter gate entry to the property, which could be just as a civil level for someone that can access to go on and cut the grass or do some general civil works that have no requirement other than that's the only access level. So the control measures we have in place, we're quite comfortable of controlling the access. Level 2 could have been an access to a point that goes up. I'll use my water network as an example, to a reservoir, where you're at a point to the ladder or to get access up to the top of the roof, or in my case, the reservoirs. They might have that first 2 levels, 1 and 2 levels, to get through onto the property, get through to the first point of access to be able to get up to a rooftop or a reservoir top. To access could be an RTU unit up there. It could be, other requirements. But then to have a full access onto a site, a level 3, where we have, a person's got access where they're able to have full access into, my case, could be a water hatch, get down into instrument hatches, but there's high risk involved in that role. So to have the ability here to be able to roll a system out quite quickly and have the appropriate specialised levels in place to control access and access points was an advantage of what we saw. And in relation to the Bluetooth capability, where you can access a site on site, you pair and activate your key using a passcode. What we have found since we rolled it out is, and Jeff just alluded to it just before, was I can set someone up on site. So rather than having to, mechanical, well, if the key doesn't work or there's an issue, short of cutting a padlock off, I can rectify the issue and troubleshoot it on site remotely. To long as the person's got the key and there's charge in it, which most times they do, I'll be able to jump in the system and assign the relevant access, fix the issue and provide access levels remotely within 5 to a 10 minute time period, rather than sort of the guys leaving site and the job doesn't get done, then we've got to rebook and go back to a site, and it just creates delays in the service of what we're doing. So the ability of that, and then the final point on the Bluetooth is when you go out into the regional areas, provided you've paired and activated your key prior to your network dropping out. So this, constantly happens, and you go into known areas or known spots out in the regional areas where network may, fall off, or whether it's 15 minutes or half an hour, wherever the site may be. You pair your key before using the Bluetooth capability, and it retains that memory. So actually, when you get to site, it's irrelevant that you've lost network. So the actual key will continue to operate whilst there's no network. So the advantages to the Bluetooth as well is, as we found that attractive as well.
Thanks, David. Jeff, I might bring you back in here as well, just to talk a little bit more to that subject of Bluetooth, because as I understand it, with that Bluetooth capability, it really does mean that you can tailor your system to exactly what you need.
So we're using the Bluetooth capability. Essentially, the system has software, or the systems all have software, keys and locks. And the software at the moment is not communicating directly to the keys. So you have to link it somehow. We're linking it with an app and a Bluetooth that allows keys to update. So you set the key to work for a few hours, it automatically stops working. If they want to refresh it, they use an app on their phone. The key talks to the phone via Bluetooth, and it obviously is connected to the database. And that would refresh the key. It's two-way communication. So it downloads the audit trail, it uploads a new operational period, but it would also upload access as well. So I'm standing at a site, I don't currently have access, but for some reason I need access. I can contact the administrator and say, hey, I need to get into this site. Can you give me access? The answer is yes. The administrator updates the software, they update their key via the app, and they now have access. So it talks back to that efficiency question earlier, but it also adds an incredible amount of control in that a system, an entire system can just be locks, keys and software and phones. And most of the systems now also whitelist those phones in the database. So as an added precaution and security measure as well.
Great. Thanks for that, Jeff. Great to hear a few of the additional benefits. Let's move ahead now. We'll go ahead to the next slide. And as you can see on screen there, we're going to start looking at some of the benefits that can be gained from electromechanical systems that the facilities managers actually seeing day in, day out. So let's skip ahead to the next slide again there. Yep, excellent. There we go. So you can see that we've put a few of the benefits up on screen for you all to see. Gentlemen, we've obviously covered quite a lot here today. You know, there are a lot of drivers for looking at installing a system like things like customized access. We can delete lost keys. We can have additional control to integrate with other systems to give access to contractors and staff. Paul or David, I'm really keen to hear from you a little bit more, just about anything we might have missed there that you sort of saw as benefits in using these systems. Paul, I'll throw to you first. What are some of the additional benefits that you saw as a facilities manager in using an electromechanical key system?
Laura, I think the single biggest benefit that I saw is the ability to personalise keys. Traditionally, with a mechanical key system, you build a hierarchy and everybody knows how that works, and it's fairly structured by types of room and so forth. Which means, of course, that people then get access to a suite of rooms where they actually may need to go into one or two of those rooms, and that can create safety problems for you and so forth. It also means you end up keeping separate keys for different types of plant that need to have a license to use. With an electromechanical key, because the keys can be personalised, the first thing you can do is you can relate the key, the program on the key, to what a person is licensed to do, such as drive a forklift. But for a facility manager, that creates an extra challenge, though, in that you have to reshape your thinking from doing a suiting system to a personalised system. And certainly what I've found there is at first you try to over-personalise, but actually when you start thinking about what is a person's role or a group of staff's role and contractors, and what access do they need to do their job, then you develop a different approach to suiting, and that means that you can personalise the system. And it sort of tied in with the streamlining on the slide there, and makes the use of keys far more sympathetic to people's roles and to people's qualifications to undertake certain works. And you're on mute, Laura.
Sorry about that, guys. Thanks so much for that, Paul. I'll go to you now, David, just to hear your thoughts on just any of those additional benefits that we haven't already covered.
Look, I think a couple that we found of benefit was a single key to multiple devices or to multiple people. So where we have to, potentially look at in the mechanical system where it could be just a one key per one person. These keys, electromechanical keys, are, it's one key could be programmed for 20, 25, 30 plus users. So we're using ours through our network through key cabinets. So we're able to the ability to monitor and track keys, but using passcodes to authentication with the keys. So when you're Bluetoothing and pairing your key, the advantage is that I've got one key that can be come in and out of a key cabinet on a daily basis with different users. So as long as they're applying their passcodes and activating the key on site, so we found a lot more advantages in that space with the key stuff like that. The other big advantage we found is not only the key is generic, but the padlocks are generic. So in a rollout phase, when we're rolling out, I just had a box of padlocks and the keys were all, come through that were programmed. We remotely programmed the users and the descriptions to it. But as for, streamline the process with, I just get a key out of a box when I'm on site and I had 5, 10 that I need to change over. They all can just go into the generic. So it makes it really quick and easy for the guys that are rolling it out to be able to change over and just updating your descriptions in the software. So the other thing with keys is generic. You don't have to worry about key cutting. You don't need to engage in locksmiths to do manual key cuts with a mechanical keys. So the advantage, because they're generic, your turnaround time, if you had an event happen, you've got to get keys replaced or whatever you determine to do. It's a quick process to be able to issue another generic key, program in the system versus waiting, potentially 3 to 5 days for mechanical keys to be cut. So it actually enhances the process in relation to those events.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, David and Paul. Now, just looking specifically at the slide that we've got on screen there, I might just bring you in, Jeff. You're obviously the subject matter expert on electromechanical key systems. Can you just talk us through some of those benefits on screen again for us?
Okay, so if I read through them, so lost keys, obviously we all understand. If we lose a key and it fits the entire system and it was a mechanical system, we either risk manage it or we rekey it. If we got 1,000 doors spread all over Australia or even over an entire site, it's a huge expense. Over 10 years or 15 years, if you do 2 or 3 rekeys, you've actually paid the difference between a mechanical system and electromechanical system. However, you get all the extra stuff. Above that, obviously, the other advantages like an audit trail, full auditing keys and locks, and so forth. Contractor management is really important because the contractor management, I guess, to me, that's when I say contractor management, I mostly mean staff and contractors. The beauty of an electromechanical key system is it's being administered by central administration software. That means you can integrate. You can integrate it with WHS systems. So before a contractor accesses a water tower, we can check their insurance is up to date and they've done induction and so forth before they're actually sent through the update on their key. Obviously, it's not 100% real time, but the shorter the operational window is, the more closer it is to real time. And that sort of integration there with WHS systems, most probably the big one we see. However, we're also looking at lots of integrations with access control systems. And obviously that leads into streamlining access management, because not only does it streamlining the management, but if you're integrated with other systems, you could obviously populate the personnel and user data from there. And on the end reporting, we generate an audit of every single thing that happens, and that every time a key is used, the key records it, the lock records it. Every time someone updates a key, it's in the database, and there's a full audit. So I think the benefits over a conventional master key system are massive. We're almost at the level of hard cabling, but we're a fraction of the cost. Back to you, Laura.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for summarising all of those benefits for us. Now let's move ahead to the next slide, and we will be looking again at these all of these benefits in a little bit more detail. And I will just remind everyone as well that's watching, we will be sending around this presentation afterwards for you all to sort of review at your leisure. So I won't necessarily go through the process of reading all of these points out, but what I do want to do is looking at this particular benefit of lost keys and the ease of being able to replace them. Paul, I wouldn't mind going to you just to get your thoughts. Just how important is this benefit of being able to replace lost keys so easily?
I think it is very important, and one that in practice we unfortunately often skip over because of the cost. So if we find we have lost the key, a mechanical key from a suiting system, there's a great temptation to go, oh, well, we'll take a chance. We'll push on business as usual and hope the key never reappears in the wrong hands. Sometimes that might be appropriate, but most times really you should be thinking of rekeying, and that obviously comes with a significant cost. Whereas, as has been said already, with the electromechanical key, they're all programmed to drop their programming to become dead after a certain period of time, which the administrator can choose. So if the key gets lost, you can be confident that within a few hours or a day or two, it will be no good to anybody, even if they find it. So that is a huge benefit. I'll do just a quick extra one as well that relates to key quantities in that, again, with a mechanical key, you're sat at reception and people come up and say, can I have a key for this, a key for that? And you rapidly find you've run out of keys. So you have to say to someone, the next person, no, you'll have to wait till the key comes back again. Whereas if you've got a cyber key, you just pick up the next one, program the key, and away they go. So you essentially never run out of keys, and lost keys, as we mentioned, rapidly become a dead key, and so the integrity of the system is maintained.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul. I mean, it's clear that this ability to being able to replace lost keys so easily just would give a huge level of peace of mind to a facilities manager. Let's move ahead to the next slide. And in this one, we are looking at contractor management. Again, we won't read through all of the points, but David, I would like to go to you and just ask the question, do you see an advantage in being able to manage contractor access remotely?
Yes, absolutely, especially in the space of accountability. So the improved accountability that we are currently seeing since we rolled out the system has dramatically improved, especially in around permit to work systems. So in the business that I'm in, and I know there's other businesses there that are, there's procedures and processes in place where they, as an example, where one of our contractors may be on one of our sites and need to call through to our control operations room. You check in to say they're on site. They go off, they complete the job, and then when they're finished, they're required to call back into the control operations room to check out. So it's also a safety aspect too of some of the high risk areas they're working in the water networks. Previously with a mechanical system, it's very difficult to be able to have any measures in place that you can work towards the accountability with ensuring that the process and procedures are currently being followed. Since we've rolled this out, the compliance to comply with our check-in and check-out procedure has dramatically improved, because if we have any investigation that's required or anything that needs to be looked at, we've got something to verify now. We've got live audits where we can refer back to see when a site was accessed through the passcode, so we can identify who the user was and who the contractor was, and then be able to, if there's a breakdown in that process where they didn't bring in to check in or check out, we can have that discussion with those contractors and raise that through them. So in a sense, the accountability has improved in our procedure and processes and compliance. It also assists with tracking with expired training. So from a compliance perspective, we can also utilise a system where with the integration process that can occur, that if someone's got expired training for whatever the case may be, it expired last week, and then they go and try to access the site today, the system automatically is smart enough and it picks that up and it denies access. So accountability and improved control measures in place, and ultimately it's assisting us to keep our people safe. Thanks,
yeah, fantastic, David. That last one in particular is obviously just a huge benefit to the organisation in managing the risks that you carry day in, day out. We'll move ahead to the next slide now. And in the next one, we're looking again at streamlining access management. Jeff, I wouldn't mind bringing you in at this point. What features do allow the facility to streamline access management?
Okay, so obviously David's touched on the ability to update keys and handle things in that way. In this one, our most common access management that we see, a lot of our clients want the software, administration software supplied in the cloud, so software as a service, and then they're looking for virtual password management style systems and security. So there's a lot of, obviously there's LDAP and Active Directory and Okta and virtual sort of password security, single point sign-on systems there. Often we see clients using electronic key cabinets, but specific electronic key cabinets to the electromechanical system, not the generic style ones. And obviously they want to use their existing media as the credentials to retrieve a key from that cabinet. So David mentioned that he'll have a key that's shared by many people. Some electromechanical key systems have complete cabinets that will allow them to issue and program keys, and we use the traditional access control media. One of our clients has Gallagher's and is looking for an integration with the Gallagher system, which we believe will be deployed in 2 weeks. So the Gallagher's card will be presented to the electronic key cabinet. It will understand that I'm the locksmith and or the electrician. I'm allowed to get a key to all the roof cavities. It will issue the next available key in that cabinet, which are all generic in the cabinet. If someone steals them or they're unprogrammed, they do nothing. Pull out the key. I now have an electrical key. I can go wherever I want. So that integration between Gallagher's, for instance, and or other access control panels and our system are another way of streamlining it. And obviously, you put the user data in one system and we sync the system so you don't have to do it twice. That's where I see the streamlining, but definitely leading back to where David was, the contractor and employee compliance and induction style systems to ensure they allowed to go to that site, they've got their insurance up to date, they've done induction, all those things are checked before the key is updated, is most probably the most asked question I get.
Yeah, right. That's good to know. And good to know that there's obviously a huge benefit that can be provided with using an electromechanical system. Let's move ahead to the next slide, and we'll touch on that final benefit from that initial list on the slide that we had a couple of slides ago. And in this one, we're looking at reporting. Now, we have, Jeff, I know you covered this a little bit, but I'd like to go to David here just to hear a little bit more about your hands-on experience in using some of the reporting capabilities. Just over the different systems that you've used over the years, what sort of reporting functions have you used and what benefits have you seen by accessing the reports that you can access with these systems?
Yeah, sure. I guess in a mechanical world, I've really come from a manual process. So whether it's manual key registers, Excel spreadsheets, those type of data that we use over the years. But what I can say that since we've rolled this out is I now have an online analytical reporting direct out of the system. So logging in the system with a click of a button, the advantage of what we're finding is one, we run reports to make sure that what's happening out in our network is aligning to our business. We can at any point check authorized access that's out in the network, unauthorized access attempts. So that may sort of highlight a trend or an issue that's out there that someone might be going around network, repeatedly trying to access a particular site or, from an investigative perspective. So it highlights that if, all the attempts that are happening on these sites, so it may highlight an issue with a user that's just get their passcode or the process incorrect when they're Bluetoothing, and pairing and activating a key, or potentially could be something untoward that may be going on of someone that's got a key that we're unaware of that might be trying to access a particular site. It also highlights, time on site's another one for us. So, especially in our contract, in our third parties that access our site. So we can also track, people that are time on site. And we can also see an updated live number of active keys that are out in our network at any day or any given time. So to be able to sort of have the online analytical functions, and that's just naming a few that I've mentioned there, there's a far more that can, that we can go into. But for the period of time we've got here, unauthorized, authorized access, time on site, number of keys out in the network, that's a live system that I can get access to if I have an executive that comes to me or our health and safety team come to me and raising some concerns. Through a live system, I get straight on and get real data. I guess that's the real data is the key for us versus a manual process that may or may not be inaccurate on who's got a mechanical key. We don't really know, other than a document that may have been signed 1, 2, 3, 5 years ago that's outdated. So we are definitely seeing from an online reporting perspective the benefits since we've rolled this out.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really interesting, David. And look, I think it goes to show there can be no secrets at a facility when there is an electromechanical key system in place. Let's go ahead to the next slide. And I think we'll find that that's actually going to wrap up our presentation for today. You can see there, everyone, that Jeff's details are up on screen. As I mentioned before, we will be sharing this presentation with everyone after the fact so that you will be able to access that afterwards. The good news is we've finished the presentation in really good time today. So we have time for quite a few audience questions, and there have been quite a few that have come through, which is great to see. So I will start working through those now, and we will try and chip away at as many as possible. First question I have on screen here is from Jed Whitaker, and I wanted to touch on this one because it's pretty much what we covered in the last question there. The question is, does the system keep an access log? Can I see who opened a particular lock at a given time? David, I think you did answer that really, really well. But Jeff, is there anything that you want to add there? I mean, exactly how much can a facility manager see in terms of who's opened particular locks at different times?
Okay, sorry, I'm just getting Al and Jed. Jed, the whole system has an audit. Each lock records which key opened it, when it was opened, and this is all the systems do this. The keys hold an audit trail as well, and then obviously that audit trail is not remotely sent back automatically via Wi-Fi or something. When you update the key to work for another 4 hours or whatever via Bluetooth, as I described before, that audit automatically comes down. So it's not 100% real time, but as a scenario, you had a site, and let's go back to a water tower, something went wrong there and you wanted to interrogate the cylinder, you could create that job in the system effectively, send it to any user key and say, just go and open the front gate for me. That would then get that audit trail onto that user's key. They can update that key via Bluetooth and you've got the audit live. So it's not 100% real time. And I guess coming back to advantages and disadvantages of hard cabling a system against electromechanical, hard cable is real time. This is almost real time, but not essentially. So there's an audit everywhere in the system.
Fantastic. Thank you for your answer there, Jeff. We'll go to another question now. This one's come in from Aaron Lincoln. Aaron wants to know, can the software integrate with other access control platforms? I know you did touch on that a little bit during the presentation, but Jeff, if you could just give us a quick answer on that one again.
I would say, answering Aaron, it's probably the most important part of our business. Funnily enough, we got into integration by integrating a robot in our warehouse. We now have 5 full-time Australian-based integrators or web developers based in our Newcastle office. It is the way of the future. Everyone wants to integrate, and if it's overlaying a safety and compliance app over the top of the existing app, or if it's with Gallagher's, which is just about to go live, or any of the others in Arrange, Protege, they're all planned and all coming now. And really there is a lot of, it is our aim. However, the biggest question at the moment in integration is always to do with that permit to work, WHS, and induction and safety. They just keep on asking it. So that's what we're seeing. But definitely the Gallagher system is almost ready to go and will be deployed at Melbourne Uni, I'm hoping in the next week.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeff. That must be very exciting for you. I'm going to go to another question that has come through from Aaron, but it is a particularly good one, so I do want to dedicate a bit of time to this. This is a question to David and Paul. Aaron wants to know, what was the original problem that you were trying to solve by implementing electromechanical keys? David, I'll go to you first. I mean, I imagine it was possibly different at different facilities, but what was sort of the main impetus for pushing to go ahead with electromechanical key systems?
Thank you for that, and thanks, Aaron, for the question. Twofold was, one was, and I mentioned earlier, non-compliance on who was accessing our sites. So what we found, obviously, with no cabling, no power source, and it was a quick system to roll out, but the benefits we got back were improved compliance with people or contractors, even our own internal staff, following procedures of calling in on operations or a control room as such. So a compliance and being compliant with what the procedures are or the processes were was a big driver for us with, again, in the water network and some of these areas that they're going up with that required working at height permits. There was just a permit to work there. There was high risk areas with accessing water, so to speak, from a reservoir. So a big one was around that, with providing audits around that. So
great, thank you for that, David. And we might go to Paul now for your take on that one.
The first driver has been loss of integrity. And that's normally discovered when you've done an audit periodically, and at some point the number of keys you can't find becomes intolerable. So you realise you have to do a rekeying exercise. Now you could do that with any of a variety of keying systems, but the thing that has driven me towards using the electromechanical key is the fact I've worked in sites and multiple sites where you have many short-term visitors, each with their own key requirements. And so the advantage of the electromechanical system is that you can do a bespoke key for each individual user, programmed for the time they'll be on site, and then it lapses. This is the only system that you can do that with, and that's been a key factor in making the decision to go to electromechanical systems when it's come time to rekey.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Paul. Now, another really good question that's come in. This one's from David Sutton. This one is, David's wanting to know how the locks perform in harsh environments. So, for example, somewhere that's close to a seaside, somewhere that has chemical exposure, something that might be exposed to hydrogen sulfide, as an example. Jeff, I might go to you first on that one, and then we might see if David and Paul have some sort of first-hand experience with those kind of harsh environments. But Jeff, your take on that one first?
Okay. Okay, David, I'm going to tell a story. The story is New Zealand Post. We rolled out locks to every single, well, almost every single street mailing box in New Zealand. At the same time as that rollout, the use of, and I might have the wrong chemical, the bonding agent between chrome plate and mild steel which is some toxic chemical, was banned in the US. What the chemical they did use to bond those two things reacted with the air in places like Rotorua and so forth through New Zealand. So we had post boxes that wouldn't open, and then the next day they would, then they wouldn't. And well, we had 2,500 of them, so plenty of them. What happened was a driver, a DHL postal driver in North Auckland said, "Why don't you use stainless steel?" I said, "Oh, it's not magnetic and it won't conduct electricity." And he said, "Well, use one of the other ones." And he was an Indian guy, and he said, "It's 403 or 304, I think he said." This is 15 years ago. So we now have basically changed to stainless steel cores. The locks are very suitable for harsh environments. The padlocks, for instance, are IP68. They're suitable. If they're covered in gunk, we rely on contact with our systems. Other systems rely on contact. They're not using proximity from the keys, so the connection has to happen. If they're clean, they'll do and communicate. If they're not clean, we say, hey, clean them. But what has happened in more recent times, so I was talking with the development of the cylinders, which have changed a lot over the years, but also the materials have stayed rather similar. What has changed more recently is the keys in the last 3 to 4 years in our system have advanced massively. Like because now we've moved away from battery management to rechargeable keys, it means we can pump a lot more power through to the key, and the rechargeable keys are sort of like mobile phone batteries. That's how I would compare the management of them, but we pump more power across. So dirt and other contaminants are of less impact on the key opening the cylinder. But I've had cylinders on post boxes all over New Zealand, depot boxes in Australia. Currently, if you watch our website, you'll see some pictures of, I believe, Arlington Reef, which Bureau of Meteorology, which is in the middle of the ocean somewhere off Cairns. Whilst we weren't going to put locks out there, I've asked them to put them out there and take photos every time to see how they perform. But I guess my current best example would be with a government department in Canberra. I can't say the name, but they have manhole covers in the ground all over Canberra. And these manhole covers have our locks on it. And if you'd like to contact me, I'll put you in direct contact with the gentleman there who will speak to you. Of course, we have issues if they're covered in mud, but the main problem down there is they go underwater for a week. Once they come out, then they still operate. But, you know, the older keys to the newer keys, we definitely find the keys are more our issues rather than the environment. The keys are in people's pockets, they throw them on the dashboard, they run over them and so forth. And it's like your computer at home. Not many of us are using a 15-year-old computer. However, I have many clients using 15 and 20-year-old locks, but the keys get a harder life and we bring them up to date over time.
Great, thanks for that, Jeff. Paul and David, I might check in with you at this point and to see if you have any examples of where you've installed these locks in really harsh environments. Do either of you, David, I'll go to you first. Do you have anything to add there?
No, look, I mean, obviously in the water network, so, you know, we do have some of our sites out in extreme weather. So, but what I can confirm that, you know, one of the drivers for us was the IP68. Having that rating, and we've had, you know, systems in the past where you had to have a requirement, you had to have a little manual cap at the end of the padlock. It's a manual process to cover them up. What we've done here when we rolled this out is that we actually haven't gone down that path with caps. So we're confident that the IP68 rating in the water and where these locks on hatches, some wet wells and areas of where we put them, where they're just, you know, they may not be sitting submersed underwater, but they're sitting, you know, in decent puddles of water, so to speak. So, and to date, we've had a couple of dirty, and refer to what Jeff has said, a simple cleaning process, cleans it out, and then we've had no issues with ongoing with the padlocks then, you know, working and activating. So we tick quite a few of those boxes in the water, the chemical space, and so far we haven't encountered any issues, and we're quite confident with that IP68 rating. So, Laura?
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeff. And Paul, anything else to add there?
I've had no problems with the environment in which I've used these keys. I see someone else has asked, how can the system fail? The biggest fail point I've always found is the users. And we can't survive without them. It comes down to getting your users well trained.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a really good point to raise there, Paul. All right, well, looking at the time now, we are pretty much right on time to wrap things up. So in the interest of keeping to time and letting people go off and have their lunch break or get back to work, I will wrap things up here. Now, if we didn't get to your question today, we will forward your question to our speakers along with your email address. So our speakers will get back to you on that one. But that brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar. So I'd like to extend a huge thanks to Paul, David, and Jeff, who have all shared their expertise with us, and to you, all of our attendees who have tuned in and joined us today. As I said, shortly after we conclude, we'll be sharing the PowerPoint presentation with you, as well as the recording of today's webinar. That'll come through to the email address that you used to register for this event. So do keep an eye out for that email in your inbox. But for now, thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at another virtual event soon.